This special episode of Let's Talk Boundaries, my husband and I will be sharing the inspiration behind my latest book on how to break free from the residual effects of childhood traumas. Whether you're looking to heal from your past or support someone on their healing journey, this conversation is sure to provide valuable perspectives and hope. This is Pamela Bird, your boundaries coach, and let's talk boundaries, shall we? Well, this is the last week in January, and from the beginning of this month, I have been interviewing authors, and if you've had a chance to look at them, then you know how powerful these authors are. These are first-time authors, and now you've got one more author, and guess who that is? Me. It's me. So I wanted to make sure I rounded off the month with information about my book, and I thought, oh, I can't actually interview myself, so I thought, who would be the best person to interview me but my husband Tyrone? So I've invited Tyrone to come and interview me so that you get a chance to get all the information from someone that's being interviewed, not just someone who's talking about their book. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you, if you haven't met him yet, to my husband Tyrone. Tyrone, take it away.
Well, thank you. Hey, guys, you are in for a treat tonight to hear from the number one author on this subject, and that's my wife, Pam. And so I got a bunch of questions that I want to ask her in reference to, we're going to talk about her book. And her book is I Had a Twin, and it's Disrupting Childhood Trauma. And so I want to talk about, and I want her to explain why she wrote this book and why it's very significant that you guys read this book. And so some of the people who probably bought it, I want to make this as a disclaimer. So guess what? For you guys who bought the book ahead of time, we appreciate that. We're thankful for that. But I want you to do one thing. I want you to go back and read it again. Here's why. It's because I had a book that I thought that I knew a lot about. And I could quote a book called 5 Love Languages. I can quote it back and forth. And then I read it again. And I was like, I don't think I read this book. So what I'm telling you is that this book right here, if you got it for the first time, I would recommend you go back through it and read again. And so I'm going to interview her on that, and she's going to talk about why she wrote this book and so forth. So without that, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, she's ready. All right. Let's put on my engineer equipment.
Glasses.
And we're going to start it off, okay? What made you write the book and why?
Okay. My sister passed away back in 2021, and she took her life. And this was very significant when you lose someone, especially your twin sister, but to know that she took her own life is pretty devastating, as you can imagine. If anyone has ever experienced a suicide, then you know how devastating it is, and no one can really talk to you about what that felt like if they haven't experienced it. And really, even if you've experienced it, no one has experienced it the way that you have. And my twin sister and I were very close. We were fraternal twins. But that closeness that we had, it was devastating, and so much pain that was involved with that I knew that was something I needed to do for her. And because of what she'd experienced throughout her life, I knew that I needed to write a book about her. I wrote it because I don't want people to think it's a book just about her, but it's about traumas. It's about childhood traumas that we take with us into our adult lives if we have not resolved those issues. And oftentimes, if you did not have a nurturing parent to support you through the trauma, then most chances are you still have adverse experiences of childhood traumas. And if you haven't dealt with them, if you've just kind of brushed them under the rug, then you're still dealing with some residual effects of that childhood traumas, and it's impacting other people in your life. And the book is the purpose of the book is to identify how there are traumas that we experience in our lives, and sometimes they're generational. A lot of times we have people, like if we have our parents that were abusive to us in any way, most chances are they experienced some form of abuse as well, and it's generational. And so before we carry that generational trauma into the lives of our children or our significant others, what I call collateral damage is what we create because we impact their lives and we infect their lives in a negative way. And then there are a lot more people that are impacted by the trauma that was done to us years ago. And so this book was, subtitled How to Disrupt the Cycle of Childhood Trauma, because even though we experience the trauma, there's things that we carry on with us. Even if we're healed from them, we got done the work, there's still some residual effects that are impacting our lives based on our behavior, based on our decisions, based on how we treat other people. But we want to make sure we can at least sever that and disrupt that cycle just long enough to be able to prevent that cycle from continuing on in the lives of the next generations that come after us.
Wow, okay. That's some good information. And I felt it. I know that I knew Angie as well, and not as, close as you, but it's just the fact when you lose a loved one, and it's because of issues like that, it's very important that that message gets out.
Mm-hmm.
So that someone else, including our generational family members and children, can understand and get through that healing as well. So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
that's a great point. So here's another question let me ask of you. Your book is written in three sections,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And it was interesting when you put these sections together. So I want you to explain each one. I know you talk about drama, you talk about trauma, and then you talk about mama.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so explain the significance of all three of those.
Sure. Well, I thought it was important to break it up into different parts because it can be overwhelming. A lot of times people will think about where they are right now and they'll begin to beat themselves up or feel bad about who they are and start to blame themselves for things that's happened to them, which is one of the reasons why it's broken up into the three sections of trauma, drama, and mama. The trauma that I talk about in that section is about really understanding where trauma comes from, how it impacts you, how it impacts your brain, and understanding that there's nothing wrong with you. Whatever happened to you your brain was impacted by that, and everyone's brain is impacted differently. And so you'll learn about ACE, which is adult childhood experiences. I'm sorry, adverse childhood experiences. Adverse childhood experiences are any form of trauma that you've experienced up to the age of 18 years old. And so anything that you experience, there's something that it does to your brain. You may realize that there are people that have experienced traumas that some children may not learn at the same pace as other people. Some kids may act out. Some kids may crawl into a ball, crawl into a shell. Some kids become very depressed. Some kids become very angry and they become bullies. So it just depends on how that individual brain receives the trauma messages through cortisone that comes through the brain. And so a lot of times we think that because a person experienced certain trauma that they're going to act a certain way. They're not. They just aren't. So that part helps you to understand trauma. It helps you to understand where it comes from, how the brain responds to it, and what are some of the ramifications of that. It could be environmental, it could be, and it talks about the different types of trauma that one would experience. A lot of times, I know with you, I've talked to you about some things that happened in your past, and you did not even classify that as a trauma. But let's say, you know, talk a little bit about, Tyrone, one of the things that you identified once we talked about it that was a trauma, childhood trauma for you.
Well, I know we talked about my sister and her death and how that occurred. Uh, it was devastating, a traumatic experience, but I didn't internalize it the way my brother internalized it. You know, he said it really affected him a lot, and he was just didn't look at life the same way because of it. And
Mm-hmm.
whereas I saw a hurtful thing. I guess internally I compartmentalized it and put it in a place to where I knew about it, I could feel the pain, but it wasn't something that would stop me from doing what I need to do. So people, it affects people differently based upon who they are,
Mm-hmm.
and no way is like the right way or the wrong way. It's
Mm-hmm.
just that's just how we're created.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with us. because of how the way that our bodies process that trauma. And I'm glad you said that, because here we're talking about two men versus me, myself, with a woman. And even men and women process trauma differently, but they still have residual effects from that trauma if it's unresolved. And so, no matter whether you're man or woman, it's important that you identify, okay, where is this coming from? How do I see myself um, responding to that or reacting to that trauma today in ways that may not be healthy? And because what that can do is that can cause a lot of challenges and issues with relationships. And we may think, oh, we're good, we go get a job. But there are people who experience trauma that are workaholics. They'd rather work than go home and deal with a relationship because of maybe depression, because of anger, or a lot of times it's because of things they can't even identify. They just know they don't feel like themselves, and they feel less than. And so therefore they don't want to spend time with people, because in their minds it may feel like they're not good enough. And so they choose to not even participate. And then there's a lot of men that deal with childhood traumas that haven't been resolved. And for some reason, depending on who put that trauma on them, they may not be able to commit to relationships because of fear of what will happen if they do. It could be a fear of loss, abandonment, and or abuse. And so because they've been through it, they've got to the point where they have commitment issues. They cannot commit.
Hmm.
And that's see how it starts to affect people in relationships. It hurts other people, creates collateral damage, because it's something that they didn't look at, and they didn't resolve that issue so that they could have healthy relationships.
Hmm. That's good. That's true. So now, what about this drama in Mama? I'm not gonna
Okay.
let you off the hook on
No,
that
we're
one.
not.
So,
Okay, so we did the trauma.
yeah.
The drama is the main thing I like to really delve into, and the reason for that is because that's where we are now. And as I talk about in the book, there's a thought of what we wanted to do when we grew up, right? What do we want to be when you grow up, right? Things that I wanted to do, I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a lawyer, or I wanted to be a psychotherapist, or I knew that I wanted to be a business owner, an entrepreneur. And that was because I had in my mind this whole business of framed motivational quotes that people would purchase from a store that I had, because I wanted people to have a visual of being lifted up. And so I wanted to do that. And, a lot of times we think that, okay, something disrupted me from doing those things, when actually they really didn't. And that's the part we have to be mindful of, is that just because this happened to us doesn't change who we are in our soul as a human being. And that's why we have to get to the point to identify the core of that pain or that chaos or that dysfunction and toxicity that happened in our lives. Because it's not until we do that we can get back to identifying the gifts that God has given us, because those gifts are still in there. There's just something that's pushing them down. And I have to say that I believe that what's pushing them down is who's pushing them down, and that's the enemy. Because the enemy knows that God has given you a purpose, and he will do whatever he can to prevent you from fulfilling that purpose. So he will use your childhood experiences, the ones that he's caused. He will use those childhood experiences for you to carry with you, to hold on to, so that you cannot perform and do the things that God has placed you on this earth to do.
Hmm.
So that's the part that I am so adamant about and passionate about, helping people to identify what are the behaviors that I am exhibiting that stem from that trauma that I may not have even recognized, given attention to, or felt like, I'm good. I don't have to. I've already dealt with that. I'm not. That doesn't affect my life at all.
So that's causing that what we call that BET drama
Yeah.
that we experience going on.
Drama?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't have to live with drama.
No.
We really don't. And a lot of people thrive on drama because in their generations before them that brought it up to them, that's all they've experienced is drama, and they think that's the way life is supposed to be. And in the book I talk about how to identify the drama and to break free from that drama so that you don't have to participate in that. And it's healthier to not participate in it, to distance yourself from it or detach yourself from it so that you can be free, so you can be healthy and you can resolve the issues of your childhood traumas that are impeding upon your progress in your life,
Mm.
impeding upon peace, impeding upon your joy, impeding upon the hope that you can have for something so much more than you're experiencing right now. So that's the drama. And then the mama aspect of it is that as women and even as fathers, but I like to use the mama because I'm using it as a parental figure. Even if you're not a parent, even if you're not a mama, you're a auntie, you are a mentor, you are a godparent. There's someone in your life that's a child, a precious child that is counting on you to be there for them, to nurture them, to lift them up, and for you to be an example for them. And when you don't deal with those traumas, you are creating collateral damage from the residual effects of your trauma, and you're passing that on to that child. That child is innocent and has no idea where this is coming from. So guess what happens after that? That child then takes that and carries that on because of the pain that they experience. They are now taking that and putting that off onto somebody else.
Mm.
And there again, we have more collateral damage from the residual effects of someone that had nothing even to do with it.
Mm. That's good. Mm. Guys, you need to get the book, and you definitely need to read it. And if you have the book, open it back up again. So I got another question here for you.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you included several entries on your section in this book, section about some entries that your sister had with her diary and her journal log and stuff like that. You included some of those entries in there.
Mm-hmm.
Explain the significance behind why you included those.
Sure. Like, one of the things I did in writing this book was I did a lot of research, not only into childhood traumas, had to go back and deal with the traumas that my sister and I faced. And with that, I went back through her journals. One, and also not only her journals, but she had recorded sessions between herself and her therapist. And I gleaned a lot of information from those recordings, incorporate those into the book as well. But I wanted to give people an idea of the reality of the thought process that someone goes through when they've been dealing with this trauma for years. And we know the dash, right? We know the date the person was born and we know the date that they die. But we don't really understand all that they went through in that dash between those two time frames. And so I wanted to include some of the journal entries to help people to truly see the impact of the pain and the abuse that she experienced from a child as a child, and how it manifested in her life, the residual effects of that and the collateral damage that it created. And the best way to do that was for you to get a clear picture of the words that she wrote down in her journal and the feelings that she was having as a result of the pain that she was going through.
Okay, that's good. That kind of gives I guess, a human experience,
Yeah,
even though you're giving it, but it gives a more human experience of we're not talking theory.
right, exactly. And to hear it straight from someone who just she couldn't deal with it anymore, and what that looked like in the pages that
Mm.
she wrote in.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so I know everybody want to know this because I want to know this too. Some people think that they don't have childhood traumas in their past, so like they don't have anything holding them back and of that nature. They kind of like say, "I'm good," that type of thing.
Mm,
What would you say to those people who may think that?
to talk to their friends. Because
Okay.
a lot of times we don't ask people, we don't get inventory, take inventory of our lives, our relationships. A lot of times we think that it's another person's issue, another person's fault. We will use the excuse that it's someone else why we can't keep friends, why we can't keep relationships, we can't keep jobs, we can't keep money, we can't control our weight. There's so many different things that happen and we don't understand why. We'll blame it on something else or someone else instead of really stepping back long enough and saying, okay, where is this coming from? Because this is a pattern. And in this pattern, it can't be everybody else. It has to be something else. And that something else is usually that person. So a lot of times people may say they haven't experienced childhood traumas. You in particular said to me you hadn't experienced childhood traumas, and you had the death of your sister because your sister was murdered. And then you also had the situations where what's the word, you were teased and you were ridiculed because of the way that you talked at a young age. And that created some residual effects for you because now there's a certain, now because we've had those conversations. But he and I were getting conversations and he would get defensive about something if I, made a suggestion or what he thought was criticizing him. And so he would come back with a retaliation because and he didn't realize why he was doing that or the fact that he was doing it until we talked about it, and he realized that, wow, I do that because when I was younger and kids would ridicule me, I didn't have any way to fight back, so I would fight back with coming back at them with my words, right? And that's painful. So that's an example of the collateral damage that's created from the residual effects of that trauma that he hadn't even realized was trauma. But once he recognized it, it was like a light bulb, right? It was like a light bulb. It was like, wow, I didn't even realize I do that. Now he's mindful of it, right? Right?
I am. She holds me accountable for it big time. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a boundaries coach. And that's one of the things that he gets the benefit of is somebody helping him to recognize when there's certain things that happen that are the result of something that happened to him in the past. And you may think, well, that can't be bad, because he was thinking, well, so that's just what kids do. You know what? We sit there and excuse what kids do as if it's written in stone, and it's not. The reason kids do the things they do are because of the things that were done to them. It's their reaction to something that happened to them. And it's not necessarily healthy and it's not necessarily right. But they take that and they put that onto somebody else. And then somebody else brain has to process that pain that someone else is putting on them.
That's why it is very important that you're reading this book, and also as a parent, as a parent, when you have children in the house still with you, that is a perfect time to begin mending some of these traumas that's out there. There may be things that you may have not done, but they experience them in school. If they come home and there's an issue, don't sweep the issue up or say that I'll handle it. Deal with the child as well, because by you handling it, it's not really handling it. You're just saying that I'm going to stop it, but as a child growing into an adult, they're going to look for somebody else to stop something that they have the ability to stop as well. So great, very important to read this book.
Ownership. I'm glad you said that, because that's ownership. That child, this is a great time for a child to learn how to deal with conflict. Not that we rescue them from the conflict, but first of all, the important thing, to your point, the first thing is when they do come home, a lot of times kids don't talk about it. They just begin to act a certain way. Mm-hmm. And you can't understand what that is. Tyrone and I were just talking about that as far as our children growing up. We feel like we're dealing with so much. We're so overwhelmed with the things that we're dealing with, most likely because of our own childhood traumas that are unresolved, that we don't take the time to really listen to our children and try to figure out, okay, where'd that come from? Why did they say that? And not brush it under the rug as if, it's going to go away. It may go away in our mind, but it will not go away in the mind of your child. And so we have to understand as parents, how is this going to impact my child if I don't address it or help them to deal with the conflict conflict in a way that's healthy and not internalize it. You know about the different cyberbullying that was going on. You know how many children committed suicide as a result of being bullying through cyberbullying, not only in person in school, but cyberbullying. They've internalized that. And if we're not paying attention to that, then we could be the ones that are ending up having a funeral for our children and just devastated by it. And it's not even necessary to do that. If we're willing to listen, to deal with our own childhood trauma in a way that we are mindful enough to be able to help our children, because we don't want to I don't think there's a parent out there or anyone that has ownership or has responsibility for any child that would want that child to experience the type of traumas that you experience as a child. And it may not be the same one, it may be a totally different one, but the effects are still the same, no matter the trauma.
My next question to you is this right here. It says, how do you know when someone has unresolved childhood trauma?
So you want to give them an
example or some clues or something like that?
Yeah. If you have very short patience, if you're very impatient with people, then there's some form of childhood trauma. If you blame people for things, if you find yourself angry all the time, if you feel like if you're a people pleaser, if you have to please other people instead of doing what's best for you. A lot of times what happens is we will not say no. This is where boundaries come in, because you are afraid that if you say no, that it may trigger something for you from your past. Typically from the past, if you said no, you were punished. Or if you didn't do what somebody asked you to do or told you to do, you would be punished, you would be abused, you would be neglected, you would be abandoned. There was that threat that would happen to you. And if that happened to you, then it's no wonder that you don't set boundaries. It's no wonder that you people please, because it's better to people please and feel frustration on yourself than experience the wrath or the perceived wrath that would happen if you said no. And so if you find yourself people pleasing, if you find yourself being angry all the time, just going outbursts for no reason, the people that just may have said one thing to you, or because I know for a while, every time I dropped something, I would get so angry that I had to look at, okay, why am I getting angry about this? And if we don't stop and ask ourselves those questions, then that behavior will continue, and it's a pattern. And if you've got to stop and recognize those patterns to be able to identify, and not only the patterns, but where do they come from? Where does it originate? So that you can be clear on why you do the things you do, because that's why you're getting the results that you're getting. And if you want to change the results, you got to change the pattern. If you want to change the pattern, you got to identify and get to the core of it so that you can make the change that you need to make in your life.
Peer pressure is a good part of that trauma that we as adults or as parents don't think about. When our children have peer pressure, and the pressure is that, hey, you're not our friend anymore, that type of thing, it causes that child who know they should say no will turn around and say yes just to be a friend. And so that's a form of trauma too that people carry on as an adult.
And that's because they don't have enough nurturing within them. They don't have enough people that are nurturing them and building them up and giving them the confidence they need as an individual, not as a sister or a brother, but as an individual. We have to make sure that we don't treat all of our children the same way, because they're all different people. They're individuals, and we can't try to force that child to behave a certain way or to want to do things that we want them to do simply because we feel that that's what they need to do. And a lot of times, if we don't give them that confidence, the ability to gain self-confidence in who they are by the way that we bring them up and we adore them, we affirm them, we love on them, we become affectionate with them. If we don't do that, then that's a good point. Because if you're not affectionate with your children, they're going to find that affection somewhere, and it's not going to be healthy. So, these are things you want to think about when it comes to what you experienced as a child. I have people say, well, my dad never hugged me. My mom never hugged me. They never. So, you go out and you end up getting it from, just because you're not getting it doesn't mean you don't need it. And I don't care what a person says. And that's one of the things they do when they grow up. They're like, I never got it. I don't need it. Right. Yes, they do. Give them a hug and see what happens. That there's something about that physical touch, especially if they yearn for it and they never got it, that can turn a life around. It really can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great. Here's a question that you make this quote in the book. So I want you guys to hear why she said this. Okay.
Come a little closer. Come a little closer.
Okay. And she want me to get close to him. You go ahead and get closer.
It's cold in here.
Y'all just don't know. Okay. In your book, you said it's easier for people to blame it than claim it. So tell me something about that.
I did say that, didn't I? The reason I said that is because it's easy to blame somebody else for where we are today rather than claim responsibility for getting the healing that we need, going through the work that we need to go through to ensure that we're not impacting other people negatively with the residual effects of our collateral of our childhood traumas. We've got to address them, because we want to make sure that, how many times have you heard people say, well, that's the way that I was treated. My parents were abusive. My parents did that. I never had this and I never had that. Okay. So now take ownership of where you are. And what I always tell people is what happened to you. If you experience childhood traumas, what happened to you is not your fault. But it is your responsibility to go through the healing process, to do the work. Why? Not only for yourself and your peace of mind and your well-being, but also for other people that you love. Your loved ones are counting on you to do that work, because their lives will be so much better when you make the decision and have the courage to stand up and do the work, not just for them, but for you as well.
Okay, that's a good statement. Taking responsibility for your own actions is really a great process in healing, because when you take responsibility for it, then you have the authority to now remove that problem from you and not wait on someone from your past that may never happen, and you're stuck.
And I have in the book different things that you can do to get the help that you need in order to resolve the issues of your childhood traumas before they damage other people.
You've been a life coach for a little while, about 18 years or so, and you and I kind of watched it. I watched you through this process. So tell me, during your 18 years, what made you focus on being a boundaries coach?
Well, because when I first started my coaching practice, I was helping women to reach goals, be it personal goals, any type of goals that they wanted to reach, business goals, if they want to become an entrepreneur, if they want to get into a better career, whatever it is, I was helping them through transitioning. And what I found out after working with a number of clients was that the reason they hadn't moved forward, hadn't gotten to the place where they wanted to go, or even close to it, was because they hadn't learned how to set healthy boundaries. And one of the things that we as women, we do a lot of nurturing, we do a lot of caring, we do a lot of pleasing, and some more than others because of unresolved childhood trauma issues, as we talked about. But a lot of times, because of those things, those will become distractions for us, and they take up so much time that it takes away from the time that we need to be utilizing to achieve the goals that we set out for ourselves. And that's another example to make sure that you're not blaming, but you're claiming. When we start to make excuses about why we haven't gotten to where we want to be, we can tend to make excuses like we had family that we had to take care of. We couldn't find a babysitter. We don't have enough money, to do that. I don't have the time to do that. These are all excuses that we come up with. And if we're going to own our future, we have to set boundaries to make sure that these things that are excuses don't aren't the distractions that we claim that prevent us from doing the things that really we need to do and doing the things that we were placed here on this earth to do. We all have spiritual gifts, and I talk about that in this book as well. But it's important that we understand that a lot of times the things that we went through, it helped us to build the spiritual gifts that we have. It really did. And it's because of it's the experiences that we had, no matter how painful they were, and our spiritual gifts that enable us to fulfill the purpose that God has for us. But when we don't recognize that, we allow outside circumstances to create the distractions that prevent us from moving forward, identifying our spiritual gifts, identifying our experiences, how they come together, and how they can help us to move forward to do the things that God placed on this earth to do.
That's good. Guys, I'm telling you, this girl right here, she bad. I can't see that. She bad. If someone had some problems that we talked about that you identified in this, that when they read this book and they identify some problems or something like that, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, the thing about it is that not only do I want them to really get this book, to really get a better understanding, but before and after, I do help you as a life coach, as a boundaries coach. I work with you one-on-one or in group sessions to help you to identify the things that may be preventing you from moving forward. You may have some areas that you don't realize that they are a result of unresolved childhood traumas, and I work with them either way, as a coach, either one-on-one and or in group sessions, to help them to work through that. I have e-courses that help them to identify different key areas. For instance, there's one e-course that I have is about identifying relationships in your life. What are the healthy ones? What are the unhealthy ones? What relationships, who do you have relationships with in your life that are preventing you from moving forward? Because the best boundary you can set is figuring out how to deal with that person. First, you got to identify that person, because a lot of times we don't realize where a certain person may be preventing us from moving forward. That certain person could be our family member. It could be our husband, it could be our wife, it could be our spouse, it could be one of our parents, it could be a sister, it could be a child, it could be a niece. Somebody may be identified as preventing you from moving forward to doing the things that you need to do. So the e-course that I have available is helping people to do the exercises to identify the people in their lives and the significance of how they show up in their lives, and whether or not that person is helping them or hindering them from doing the things they need to do. And then, as I always tell my clients, once you identify that, you no longer have a problem. You simply have a decision to make. Now, that decision is one where I come and I can help you with that, because a lot of times that fear, like we talked about, we talked about that fear of abandonment, fear of loss, fear of rejection, and I can help you through that to help you to understand who you are and whose you are, to get the courage that you need to move forward and make the decisions that you need as far as your relationship with that person.
That was good. Hey guys, I hope you've gotten a lot of great information out of here. With some parting words, because this has been very insightful, very educational, all in one. And I've learned a lot just by interviewing you through this process. What are some of your last closing comments or remarks that you'd like to say to the audience before we leave?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you. Thank you for taking the time to interview me, because I'm going to interview myself. So this was helpful. And I think and I'm glad you said that, because it gave you an opportunity to reflect on some things that you've read the book, and you live with me, but just some things in perspective, put some things in perspective as far as what other people are going through, and get to the point where you start to recognize things that people are doing. So one thing, my parting words is, have compassion for people. Understand that people are going through things. They have gone through things, and a lot of people are still struggling with the things that they've gone through. So a lot of times we may want to criticize and judge someone and talk behind their back and get with a group of other people and talk about other people because of what they did. But you don't know what they've been through. You don't know what anybody's been through. So have compassion for people, have mercy for people. Try to look at people from a different perspective. Try to walk in their shoes. And whenever someone is maybe in a position where they may be offending you, instead of lashing back or clapping back at them, try to ask some questions to get a better understanding of where they're coming from, because at that point you might realize that they got some unresolved issues, and I want to be there for them. I don't want to be against them. I don't want to add to their pain. I want to help to diminish that pain by being there for them.
That's great. Guys, I've had a blast and I love you very much.
I love
I
you.
respect you dearly.
Thank
And
you.
this was awesome.
Thank you. All right, the interview's over. So, guys, I hope you do. Oh, do me a favor and put some comments down in the comment section on, what you got out of this. What was the most impactful for you? And because it's not until you write things down and put that in that I know what are some of the things that I can help you with, or how I might have impacted you in one way or the other. So make sure you put comments. Also, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to this podcast, and that way you will get notification every time I do a podcast. I do one every week, and wouldn't it be a shame if you didn't subscribe and you didn't get a chance to hear what I had been sharing? That would be a shame, and it's just what you needed. Now make sure also you share. There has to be someone that that question you ask, how does someone know that they have some unresolved childhood trauma issues? And I said, ask a friend. There could be a friend and you don't know how to talk to them about their residual effects of their childhood traumas, and it may be creating collateral damage that but they can't admit it, or if they don't see it. Go ahead and share this with them, because I think this will be helpful for them, and it's a blessing and a gift that you can give them, as well as the book. And to get the book, you can get the book on Amazon. And again, it's I Had a Twin: Disrupting the Cycle of Childhood Traumas. Until next time, this is your boundaries coach, Pamela Bird. This is my husband, Tyrone Bird, and let's talk boundaries, shall we?